This is the question that's been keeping me up at night, and probably a few of you as well, is that what do you do when your life's work can be simulated with the click of a button? What do you do when you hear from friends who know that 70% of all recorded media will be generated by AI? And think of a movie. What that really means is that 70% of a movie will be generated by AI. Only 30% or less will be human, live action. The answer is this: it's live, it's human, it's interactive, it's community, it's everything that is in this room right now. That's what AI can't do. You see, in a world that's threatened by total simulation, what's live has value, what live has power. Live is the last scarce resource in reality. Because not only does that button press create things that craftspeople have been doing for a long time, but it also reduces the training grounds, the corporate voice jobs that you cut your teeth on when you first start voice acting, animation jobs for corporates that you do when you start out as an animator. It's all disappearing. And on the other side, veterans who've honed their craft over 50 years are having body blows as they press a button and realize that AI can do it good enough. It doesn't have to be better, it can be just good enough that somebody who's not an expert goes, yeah, that's all right. Different platforms for storytelling and live experiences, they come and they go. In Wagner's era, the 1840s, opera was the height of theatrical and entertainment experience. And he was the height of all the composers, I would argue. He aimed to combine all the art forms in one seamless experience: art, music, poetry, costume, and narrative, into something that he called Gesamtkunstwerk. Total art form, or unified art form. Basically creating something that is greater than the sum of its parts. But what we've learned in the past last 2 years, is that just because something has been true for a very long time, doesn't mean that it can't change. Now, Wagner couldn't have imagined a world in which live was no longer the predominant entertainment. And it's highly surprising. I mean, he had good precedent. He had 30,000 years of live storytelling to look back on and say, no, it's not going to change. But it did. And this is something that we see again and again in human history. Industries come, they go, skills appear and they're useful and suddenly are useless and then are useful again. But we're living not through one of those moments where it's a change of platform, the craft stays the same. We're living through a process where everything will be upset. Everything is set to change radically. But humans, luckily, are adaptive creatures. That's the root of our success. This is why we can live in the most far-flung parts of the earth. And you don't get a certificate for reaching and attaining a set point of perfection. Evolution will kill you off pretty quickly. Rather, the closest thing that I recommend to everybody is to get to perfect adaptation, at least to approach perfect adaptation. And this adaptation is what we need to do now, and it's something that other artists have been forced to do in previous circumstances, one of which is Roy Mitchell. Now, Roy Mitchell is a Canadian director, one of the founder members of the Arts and Letters Club across the road, and he was facing the advent of film, basically replacing theatre. And he stood in rooms surrounded by people just like this, just like you, his friends, his connections, people who didn't know him but were in other art forms. And he was asking similar questions. I mean, he didn't have the answer either, but he had the questions and he had the people, and that's the point. You see, he saw that theatre couldn't compete with film. Film could be distributed infinitely, and not just across countries or territories, but also through time. And that product is the same. You can watch a movie from 50 years ago and you are getting the same thing. But this quote is something that I came across and I thought, this is kind of analogous. I'll read it to you. It says, "Then as we were trudging along the road, professing to have something we had not, and promising at the top of our voices to do something we knew in our hearts we could not, because we were made of flesh and blood, we fell in with a wayfarer, who, like ourselves, could actually do most of what we said we could do, because he was made of celluloid and could travel in a can." Now, he asked the question after that, well, why bother? Why do theatre? If film can do all this stuff, then why bother doing theatre? Now, okay, if you're an animator or in the games industry, you might be thinking, well, what has this old 1920s theatre got to do with me? Well, it's because the same question is now being asked in games. Why bother becoming an animator? Why bother constructing and entering into the games industry? And the question that Mitchell asked was, what can we do that the technology can't? And in some ways, that's what studios are kind of asking now. If the technology is a given and it's so democratized that anybody can do it, well, what makes us special? And you've probably asked yourself the same question at night after you've seen Midjourney or Saw or Kling. What makes me so special? What is the motivation to keep doing something when a machine can do it faster and cheaper? And they can do it faster and cheaper, and it will get faster and cheaper. Theatre's answer was to split into two directions. The first direction, well, one of the directions is to imitate film. It adopted the language of film. The Rubicon, if you like, was crossed in 1956 at the Royal Court in a very famous play called Look Back in Anger. You don't see very many modern plays of this era, or even now, where they deliberately break the fourth wall and have conversations with the audience or have any interactivity with the audience. The audience become passive voyeurs, and we have become very good at being passive voyeurs. In fact, the attention economy demands that you have good passive voyeurs. And everybody in this room, I can guarantee, including myself, consumes more than we produce so far as media is concerned. That's just the waters we swim in. There's no guilt involved in that. That's just the world that we live in. But to go back to Roy Mitchell, his question, why theatre or why create, he went back to what theatre had that film didn't. And he believed that they were communal, for a start. It was a balance between the vision of the artist and the taste of the audience at the time. And there's always a bit of a push and pull, but it's a sort of consensus of trial and error, building up a small theatre of loyal actors and loyal audiences in this endeavour of playmaking. He saw it was spiritual. He was a theosophist. But if I was to boil it down to something very fundamental, even here there's me and there's you and there is the spirit, which is us. In this way, he was actually about, 40 years ahead of his time. It's Peter Brook that I always think of when I think of the Mocap studio, because he said, I can take any empty space and I can call it a bare stage. A man walks across this empty space while somebody else is watching him, and this is all that is needed for an act of theatre to be engaged. And this is what I think of every time I walk onto an empty Mocap volume. It is the ultimate empty space. And so I feel that I'm very lucky. I'm lucky because at my time and my place, I got to work in a medium that was total acting. The Mocap volume is literally empty, but it's so filled with the possibilities of doing anything. Anything that your imagination can come up with is possible if you have the money, but it is possible. The main difference, of course, with theatre and film is that it's interactive. You need the player to make choices in order to progress through the ludic experience, the game. The player, therefore, becomes a co-author, not a passive receiver. It's a very different place to be. And in this way, I put it to you that games recovered the interactivity that theatre had lost, because the fourth wall is a recent convention. It might not seem like it, but not that long ago, and for thousands of years before, audiences were acknowledged. Even audience interaction was encouraged. And even if somebody here doesn't play games, It is the biggest, most pervasive art form in the world, bigger than film. And multiple generations now have been playing games. There's many, many people who now have grown up with an expectancy of some kind of agency as part of entertainment, expecting that their choices have an effect. That's who the next generation of audiences are. Those are the people who are going to be willing to turn up like you're turning up tonight. I'm going to show you something from Heavy Rain. In 2008, it was the arrival of narrative-led games. The story, if you don't know it, is that Ethan Mars has to win certain trials or goals in order to get clues as to the whereabouts of his son, who will die unless he gets there in time. Now, this particular sequence is called The Shark, where Ethan Mars has been told to kill a complete stranger. The player arrives at a very mundane apartment, and you're given a choice. Do you knock on the door? Do you do it? You have the gun. Do you do it? If the player knocks on the door opens, and in the next interchange you find out that the stranger you're meant to kill is in fact a drug dealer. So, does the moral equilibrium change? Well, the door is shut again. You get another chance. Do I pursue this trial in order to save my son, or do I not do this one? If you then knock on the door and the door opens, very quickly the drug dealer gets a gun and starts shooting at you and chases you around this mundane apartment, taking pot shots with a shotgun. And this is what happens.
Hold it, man. I give you whatever you want. Got dope? I got cash? You want some dope? Please. Please don't kill me, man. I got children. These my girls, see? This one's Sarah. And the little one, that's Cindy. Please, man. I want to see them again. Please. Please don't shoot.
I'm not a murderer. I have no right to take this guy's life. He's got a family just like me. How can I take his life to save my son's? We're both fathers, for Christ's sakes. I can't kill him to save my son. I'm a father, too. But I'm no killer.
So, who here has played a narrative-based video game? Okay. Who here has had that moment when you know that your choice is going to have a whole bunch of repercussions on the character and the world? Have you had that heart-stopping moment when, oh, right? That's what narrative games do, and do really well when they do it well. But I should point out that what you've just seen, none of it existed. Every craft has been used in order to serve the purpose of that ultimate moral choice. You have the architecture, it's a suburban house. That's discordant with the use of the shotgun. And then again, going into a child's bedroom. Well, that's again, architecture and design suddenly posing another moral part of the equation. The music, Norman Courbet's music, the moment that you get into the children's bedroom, the music fades to nothing. And all you can hear, in fact, is traffic noise from a city, which I think is fascinating. What a great choice. And then finally at the end, the music comes back in. The music again informs that moment and raises that moment by being absent. Then, of course, there's the acting. That's my first video game, and anybody that's done this knows that there's no bullshitting in Mocap. That was something I discovered very, very quickly, that it picks up lies. It strips you down to your skeleton, and it will show up falsehood as quick as anything. But it's still a simulation. It's still a simulation. What I did in 2008, you can now see now, no different from film. It's interactive, but it's on tracks. You only have a limited number of choices. There's no room for improvisation. And so it's nearly there. It's near total art, but it's not quite, because it doesn't have the live element that Wagner had. And theatre survived by mirroring film or standing in contrast to it. But ever since Heavy Rain, my thing has been to look for an integration of the two. How do you mix live theatre with interactive game? Now, my first attempt was, my first public attempt, I should say, was with Faster Than Night. This was a production for Hatch in 2014 that was co-written with Alison Humphrey. Now, the compelling moment was the moment when the audience had to decide who to kill. The person that could use their quantum AI while they're absent to solve all these problems, or some other cosmonaut that you don't talk to. And of course, this guy is an unreliable witness as well. He wants to live, sure. But you'd be surprised, it was 50-50. But the response afterwards was overwhelming. Everybody came out feeling like they had been involved in something, that they'd been at the edge of their seat. And that's what you want. That's why I started becoming an actor, was because I wanted to be put on the edge of my seat. And that's the experience that you want from a story. And if you can make that edge of the seat also a participant in that story, it seems to magnify it. The moral dilemma becomes your moral dilemma. The repercussions of your choice is the one that plays out. And in this case, if you killed one of the other cosmonauts, you heard them scream. But the technology wasn't ready. It wasn't scalable, it wasn't reliable, there was a limit to what you could do, just facial camera, no body capture, very, very laggy. As per usual, I was about 10 years ahead of my time. Scooch forward then to November 2025, and with the support of Game On in Montreal, that's where I do my Mocap Vaults classes for students is there, thanks to them, they thought it'd be a good idea to try a real-time animated interactive drama coincident with the Montreal International Games Summit. And with the help of some very patient and generous Mocap Vaults alumni, we captured a raid, I'm going to call it a raid from now on, we captured a raid production in real time in Unreal Engine. Now this was intended for a live audience as well. So I wrote a 20-minute multiverse horror where the moral question was whether to kill a sleeping child or not. The fact that the sleeping child may or may not be a degree of possessed was the important piece of information. But the unraveling of the choice of who would do it and how was left up to vote. And then the unraveling of that also became a piece of improvisation. I didn't know who was going to survive. I didn't know how things were going to unfold.
Okay, probably better if one of us stays back, just in case. If we both go, it'll double the odds. Comment? Can you decide who does it? Over.
Both of you go in. Over.
Copy. It's the succubus. Take my walkie and go!
The Sekaba followed her to the real world. So we saw this as a pilot, and we learnt a lot from the technical side, but we did prove the RAID production is now possible, and it has room to grow. We had 3 actors in the volume simultaneously, and we could have added head cams as well for facial capture. We used real-time Unreal Engine rendering. We used meta-humans and pre-built environments that we could switch at the press of a button. So this means that this real-time animated interactive drama is live, and so it offers what live can offer. All the benefits of being human, including the messiness of being human. Because the messiness is what we can see is the difference between something simulated and too clean and something that is real. And if it's present, we can tell it's not a bug, it's actually a feature. And you know this. Everybody in this room who's an artist knows that it's often the mistakes that turn into happy accidents. Those mistakes seem to be led by an instinct that is almost not conscious and can be made into something better than you could have consciously decided. And you can't improvise in games, but imagine if the ending, this was the end of a sequence and you improvised it, and then you had to write based on whatever it was that the audience and the improvised actors decided to do. But this physical connection is what answers the why do it, why create. It's the physical, live sensation, the thing that puts your hairs up on your arms. But it wasn't just about like capturing a piece of theatre. This is where this is going. Okay, imagine real-time animated interactive drama on the Mocap stage. This is then also in a VR world, so virtual reality. It's a different platform, different audience, but they are able to be inside the environment that the actors' animated rigs are now in. And then after that, you can also stream to 2D, but it's interactive. And so each platform confers agency and authorship based on the proximity to the physical action. If you think the 2D stream, it's the furthest away. So you might have the weight of aggregate voting. Maybe it weights certain other choices. VR allows for interaction in a virtual space instead. You can have virtual people in the virtual space manipulating objects that the people in the mocap volume can't see. There's all sorts of things that you can do with that difference. And of course, you've got the mocap volume where you are closest to the action. But all the audiences are responsible in some way for the emergent experience and each other's enjoyment of it. So a rate production, in effect, can become live R&D that is eventually self-funding. So capture the data. You capture all the data, but not just the mocap data, but you also capture all the decisions, all the versions that you film, and you can iterate as you go. You do this, and in this process, you can optimize it, you can improve it, and you are also both creating an audience and validating it at the same time. Anybody that's ever done a pitch for either a film or a game knows that there's a moment when somebody says, okay, well, how do you know people are going to be interested? How do you know that people are going to like your game? This validates because you have the audience is already part of the community. Remember Roy Mitchell, same thing, that balance between the artist vision and the taste of the audience in the common endeavor of playmaking. This reverses the current model. Games are high risk, increasingly high risk. But the mocap studio itself has an added thing. It's now become the place of magic. I think in the past 20 years, it's clear that people have a romantic idea about what goes on in the mocap studio. And I can back this up with numbers. Ubisoft did an open house in 2025, and they expected somewhere between 500 and 800 people to turn up. Guess how many turned up? Anybody? 2,500. They were lined around the block just to do a tour of the building, and the mocap studio was the hit. Imagine if they could participate. Because the game-playing audience is not the theatre audience of yesterday. I think it's the raid audience of tomorrow. Think of all the people you know who are in this industry now and doing their craft. Think of them doing 70% less or maybe 70% of the workforce not being around. That means that the pivot that every creator, every artist needs to make has to be done pretty damn soon. So the only point of difference is that we have is what we can innovate. We're not talking about just an industry, we're talking about colleagues, we're talking about students, we're talking about the future of craft itself. We need a path forward that isn't just like move to LA or become a prompt master. We don't need that. And besides, wherever you go, you're going to be facing exactly the same problem. So here, between us all, we have all the acting and creative talent that we need. And another one has just walked in. There you go. See, now we are complete. We have everybody that we need to tell stories that we want to tell, that people actually want to hear. We can validate the stories because we can validate them in this process and create experiences that haven't existed before. But it starts like it's always started, like Roy Mitchell started, with a group of artists and creators who are willing to take risks, willing to try things out, to try and learn a new language, because that's kind of what this is. Trying things that won't work, things that don't make economic sense to work on. Who believe that it matters. And that's you, that's why you're here, and you're not sitting at home looking at Netflix. It's also why I'm piloting free classes over at the Arts and Letters Club as well. They have to be free because there's no real economic reason for doing them. Because this isn't technology looking for a purpose in order to commoditize and then make money. No, this is purpose that will build the technology that it needs. I shall sum up. What do we do when our life's vocation can be simulated with the click of a button? That was the question. The answer is that it should be live. It's human, it's community, and your power, our power, is creating what AI can't. The shared, unrepeatable human experience of the now and the now and the now. Thank you very much. Great.